Okay. First of all, I'm really privileged to be here today, so I'd like to thank you for inviting me. Uh, and actually, thank you for turning up as well, because it is a very hot day today. Yeah. Uh, and so if you see me sweating, it's more to do with the weather, not to do with the presentation. Okay, I'm gonna crack on with the presentation. What I should say is, I won't be able to see you, so 'cause I've got a presentation open. If there is any questions, Lo, could you just keep an eye on that for us? Cheers. Thank you. Okay, then. So today we're going to look at joint enterprise. So it's a really important area of law because it looks at what happens when people are involved in something as a group and how responsibility can be shared amongst that group. So this isn't about people who actually commit an offence. It's about the people who are there, who may be supporting, encouraging, or just part of the situation. Yeah. Hopefully, by the end of the session, I want you to kind of have a good understanding of how someone can be held responsible for something they didn't physically do. And think about what that means for you in real life and for your children as well. Okay, so what we're going to look at. So we're going to look at the concept of joint enterprise first. I'm going to do a little exercise with you here. Then we look at sort of like the definition of joint enterprise and the three types of joint enterprise they are. We'd have a look at a couple of scenarios and then kind of like I'll summarize it and we'd have time for questions then. Yeah, so before we get into things like definitions, I want to start with a question. I'm going to play a video. It's about 30 seconds long. And I want you to think, who do you think is guilty of murder in the situation that you see played out? Okay, I don't want you to overthink the law at this stage. Yeah, I just want you to go with your instinct of what you feel seems fair. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna play the video now.
It can be seen in parts of London every day. Gangs of youths antagonising each other. But what happens when it gets out of hand? Three teenagers approach another, but one of them is about to go too far. As his anger boils over, he takes out a knife. Stunned, one boy steps back, and another turns around and walks away. The victim is stabbed and killed. So who is guilty of murder?
Okay, so that is literally the question I want to ask. In that situation, who's guilty of murder? There's three boys. Boy one is the boy who actually stabs the victim. Boy two is the boy who stands by his side, takes a step back, I believe, but he stays there, but he doesn't do anything. And then there's boy three, who as soon as the knife appears, he walks away. So just in the chat box, just put your answers, like, one guilty, two not guilty, whatever. Yeah. I'll give you a kind of like a minute to do that. Yeah, I'm very strict. Okay. A couple of answers coming through. Okay, some good answer. You're allowed to change your mind. That's fine. So we've got all of them. Oh, okay. I'll give you. Okay. Yeah. Okay, you've got your 10-second countdown. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, then. So we've got some good answers there. We've got from 1 and 3 to all 3 of them to 2 and 3. A few say 1 and 2. And a couple say 1 is guilty of murder. Okay. We're going to come back to this. Yeah. I want you to bear your answers in mind. Okay. And see if they change when we finish this session. I know that's a bit of a cliffhanger, but it means that you all have to stay to the end. Okay. Okay, then. What's the definition of joint enterprise? So here's the legal definition. A person A may be held criminally liable for an offence committed by another B, where A intentionally aids, abets, counsels, or procures the commission of that offence and possesses the requisite mens rea, namely an intention to assist or encourage the principal offender with knowledge of the essential matters constituting the offence. So I take it that it's clear to everybody what that means. Yeah, and I probably don't need to go any further. We can wrap up early. Let's break it down in a bit of plain English. Yeah. So basically, what that meant was if you and your friends are involved in something and it leads to a crime, you could all be held responsible, even if you didn't actually carry it out. So one of the key ideas here is about risk and foresight. The law expects you to think about what might happen when you choose to be part of something. So even if something wasn't fully planned, wasn't fully explained, you might still be responsible if it was something you could have expected. Yeah. And this has real life consequences for children much more than adults, because children are disproportionately impacted because of joint enterprise. And a lot of that's around things like group fights and committing robberies with their peers. Yeah. So that's the definition. But there's 3 types of joint enterprise. Yeah. There's just where it's like about participation, then there's assisting or encouraging, and then there's like a foreseen escalation. So we're going to look at each one of those individually. So what do we mean by participation? This is the easiest one to explain. Yeah. So 2 or more people join together to commit one crime. Yeah. Yeah. So a group go out and they're going out to commit a robbery. Yeah. In that situation, everyone involved is clearly responsible because they all agreed to take part. So there's no real grey area here that they should have equal responsibility. Yeah, I think we can all probably agree with that. There's no issue with that. Yeah. Okay, then. Then there's type 2, encouraging or assisting. So this one is really important because you don't have to physically commit the crime. You can still be guilty if you assist or encourage. So this can include things like cheering someone on, acting as a lookout, or helping to plan something. Yeah. Even words alone can be enough if they encourage someone else to commit the offence. This has slightly changed since 2016, and I'll explain that when we come to one of the scenarios. So, you haven't physically done anything. Do we think that's fair? So I want you to hold that question in your mind or write it down whether or not you think that's fair. So that's type 2. Okay. Type 3. This is about foreseen escalation. Yeah. So this is where it gets a bit more complex and more probably controversial. A group sets out to commit one crime, but something more serious happens. The question then becomes, should everyone be responsible for that second crime? And the law looks at whether that second offence was foreseeable. So if something escalates and you could have expected that risk, you can still be held responsible, even if you didn't want it to happen. Yeah. And I've got a picture up there of a burglary. And the reason why I've got that is I can give you a real world example of this. So 3 people went out to commit a burglary. So they all went out and agreed they was committing a burglary. Yep. One of them went upstairs, saw the lady sleeping in bed, and sexually assaulted that lady. Yep. All 3 of those people were charged with the burglary offence and also the rape offence because it was foreseeable. And in that case, it was because the person, and they knew that the person had a history of sexual assaults. And so it was a foreseeable consequence, that something that could happen. And so therefore, they're as liable as the person who actually committed the physical act, even though that was not what they agreed when they left their house. And this is something that can catch a lot of children and adults as well, but also a lot of children. Okay, so we've talked about the definitions. We've talked about the 3 types. We've had a look at one situation, and now we're going to take a look at a couple of other situations. So the first scenario is a group assault. Yeah. I want you to think about who is responsible and why. And don't worry, this one I'm not going to give you a cliffhanger. I'm going to explain. So 2 weeks ago, Tony was attacked after school by 3 pupils, Luke, James and Billy, and he was left with a bloody nose and some bruises to his body. Over the past 2 weeks, Tony has said he is going to get all 3 of the pupils back. Tony meets with 4 of his friends, Ian, Dan, Brian and John, and they ambush one of the lads after school. Tony attacks the boy repeatedly, with his friends shouting encouragement, but they do not physically take part in the assault. Tony and his friends eventually leave, with the boy on the ground bleeding from the head and unconscious. The boy later dies in hospital from a head injury. So, the question I'm asking, and please do respond, is who is responsible and why? Just give me some shout outs if you want. Yeah. Anyone got any ideas? So Tony committed the offence. Ian, Dan, Brian and John encouraged him. Let's see if we've got anything in the chat. A child is anyone below the age of 18. As soon as you hit your 18th birthday, you're, in terms of legally, you're an adult in terms of the law. Okay.
Like teenagers, we can unmute ourselves and answer the question. Frank, want to answer it? Somebody unmuted? Yeah, Franca?
I think all of them, they are accomplices because the fact that one person, the friend was talking to them and they accepted to go, so they have to pay the price, all of them.
Yep, without a doubt, I think all of them would be charged, without a doubt. And to give you some idea of some of the possible charges, so Tony the attacker, he's the person who actually did the physical assault. So to prove murder, the prosecution must show intent to kill or intent to cause really serious bodily harm, call that GBH. Yeah, but there's a lot of evidence supporting murder. So it was a planned ambush. He had made earlier threats about getting all 3 back. It's a repeated attack. The victim's left unconscious with a head injury. So a jury could reasonably find Tony intended at least serious harm. which would be enough for a murder charge. So his likely verdict would be murder. There is a possibility it could be reduced to manslaughter if they can't improve intent. Yep. But the likelihood is, I would say, in that situation, murder is the stronger outcome. So Ian, Dan, Brian, and John, the friends, they did not physically attack. They shouted encouragement and were present during the ambush. Yeah. So this, now we're looking at secondary liability under joint enterprise. Yeah. So to convict them of murder, the prosecution has to prove that they intentionally assisted or encouraged. So shouting encouragement does count as active encouragement. However, yeah, it's a lot more stricter now than it was pre-2016. There was a test case in 2016, and before, just shouting encouragement or just being there could have got them all done with murder. It's a bit harder for the prosecution to prove now. So they need to prove, did they intend Tony to cause serious harm, or at least knew and supported it? So that's the crucial issue here. So the strongest prosecution case would probably still be for murder for them as well, if they knew it was a planned revenge ambush, which they did. They anticipated that violence was going to take place, which they did. They knew, yeah. They actively encouraged it, yeah. So Tony had discussed revenge for 2 weeks. They attended the planned ambush. They encouraged him during a sustained attack. So definitely, in that instance, a jury could infer intent to assist serious violence. And if they can infer that and they can prove that, then that would be murder under joint enterprise. If they can't prove that, then the fallback would be manslaughter. And that's if they're unsure whether they intended serious harm. Remember, we're not looking at whether they intended murder, it's serious harm. Yeah. The rest is pretty much proved that they encouraged it and that they knew the reason why they were going. There's a very unlikely third offence they could get, which would be ABA or GBH. Yep. But because of the group ambush, the severity of the attack, and that there was sustained violence that was encouraged, it would very likely they wouldn't get that at all. So as a bare minimum, the boys, Ian, Dan, Brian, and John, they're very likely to get a murder charge as well. But as a bare minimum, it would be manslaughter as well. So that just shows you that is something that can very typically happen. Yep. This scenario here isn't like Harry Potter made up. This scenario has played out on the streets of the UK and in the courts of the UK. And in these situations, everyone's been charged with murder and everyone's been convicted of murder. We've actually had it in England where the person who committed the physical assault, so Tony, has escaped out the country, and Ian, Dan, Brian, and John are sitting in jail for murder. Yeah. There was a case in Leeds like that. I think it was about 2004. Yeah. Where that's the person who actually committed it is still outstanding. Yeah. But there are people that I think it was 3 of them who are currently in prison. So no simple answer, but you can see how just by them being there, they've committed a really serious, that's a life-changing offence they've committed there. Yeah. So that old saying of, you are what your friends do really comes into play here. Yeah. Okay, scenario 2. It's slightly different. Yeah, this one is a robbery with weapons. Okay, so 4 people, once again, Ian, Dan, Brian, and John, the wrong uns. They plan to rob a local jewelry store. They go armed with a baseball bat a machete and a shotgun. Ian is the driver, so does not have a weapon. Dan, who is the leader of the group, says the weapons are to scare people and not to be used. During the robbery, the owner of the jewelry store attacks Brian, who is holding the baseball bat. The owner gets the bat off Brian and knocks him to the ground. John shoots the owner and they all escape but are arrested 3 days later. The owner dies from the shotgun injury. So the question again, who's guilty of murder? So in this one, this is about that, whether or not they could foresee that this was a possible consequence. Yeah. So the use of weapon always raises the question if serious harm was foreseeable, despite any previous agreement not to use them. Yeah. So, yep, you've all been given weapons. They've all said you're not going to use them. But is there a possibility? Is it foreseeable that you could use it? I would say once you leave your house with weapons, there is a foreseeable risk that those weapons will be used. Once again, this has a big impact for the children we work with, yeah, and because they may have a friend who carries a knife, yeah, and in the course of an assault, and that assault could be where the victim was the aggressor to begin with, yep, that knife is pulled out by that person, yep, and by their friend, and they stab and kill that person, that goes from self-defense to now looking at murder. Yeah, for all of you. So there's something about shared liability. Yeah, so the group planned a robbery. Yeah, which is a serious crime in and of itself. Yeah, but they never at any point said they was going to use weapons. Yeah, but it's foreseeable. That's how the jury would see it. It's foreseeable that weapons could be used. So the likely charge, John, it's a definite murder. He's the one who shot. And Brian, who's one of the people in the robbery, murder, joint enterprise as well. It'd be very unlikely he'll get manslaughter. The same with Dan, the leader, even though he said the weapons were only to scare them. Whilst it is legally important, it's not decisive. So it may give him some mitigation, but it's not decisive. Yeah. So he is likely murder as well. Ian, the driver, did not enter the shop. He knew about the robbery and was aware of the weapons, but didn't have a weapon. So the jury, the prosecution would have to convince the jury that he's still under that foreseeable that those weapons could be used, and he's part of that. So the likelihood is that all of the defendants would actually get charged with murder. The only one that might get say like manslaughter would be the driver. It might just be reduced to manslaughter because he wasn't in the building and wasn't in part of the escalation or anything. So he may get it's harder to prove murder for the driver. So he may well end up with a defense of manslaughter. Yeah. So once again, in a scenario, they've just planned a robbery, but it's escalated. Yeah, and it's now escalated to murder. And it's escalated to something that no one agreed to. They all still end up pretty much with a murder slide. So just think about that now as we come to the last part. I'm just going to recap on some of the stuff. So this isn't just what we're talking about. It isn't just theory. it has real consequences. Yep. People have been convicted of very serious offences, including murder, even though they didn't commit the act themselves. And this is why joint enterprise is often debated, because it can feel quite harsh. But the idea behind it is about accountability and preventing group-related harm. And hopefully we'll have a discussion about this in a bit, and we can expand on that a little bit. I said this has real-world consequences. Now, the government doesn't keep data on joint enterprise charges per se, but you are able to look at some of the Crown prosecution data, the Ministry of Justice data, and some of the action groups against joint enterprise to get a kind of rough idea. So at the moment, the government has started recording joint enterprise where it involves murder. Yep. So whilst I can't give a precise count, I can give you some kind of like from reliable sources, an idea of the scale of joint enterprise in the UK. So in 2024 to 25, CPS data said there were 168 joint enterprise homicide cases involving 511 defendants, and about 1 in 5 of those defendants were under 18. So that would say that about 100 children were charged in a single year under joint enterprise. So that's just charged, yeah. So there's a website called the Justice Gap, and they estimate that around 14%, 14 of joint enterprise defendants are aged between 14 and 17. Yep. Overall, joint enterprise prosecutions have involved hundreds of convictions since 2019. That would say that there's a significant youth component to that as well. Yeah, that 14%. And then there's research shows that, as I said earlier, children are disproportionately drawn into joint enterprises cases, especially as those secondary parties. So they're not the main perpetrator, they're in the group. So the key message here is about decision making. Being part of a group can increase risk. So it's really important about the people you hang with. Yeah, it's just as simple as that. Yep. It's also you need to have a good understanding of what your friends will and won't do. So if you are, I would never carry a knife, you say, but you know that 2 of your friends carry knives, not a good situation to be in, because you could definitely be charged with joint enterprise. Yeah. Also as well, just around that group dynamics, sometimes people go along with things they wouldn't do alone. Yep. But those decisions can have serious long-term consequences for them. Yep. And you can see that in a few of the cases, particularly the one with the school fight, yeah, where they've gone with the person. What's important as well is the law doesn't always look at individual intention. It looks at involvement. Yeah. And so that's really important for our children, because your intention can add to it, but it's about involvement, and the legal definition of involvement isn't probably the same as what we would say involvement is. Involvement, we would normally say, is physically taking part, but involvement in this sense is being in and around the scene and part of the group. So, key takeaways: you don't have to commit the crime to be found guilty. Encouragement and involvement matter. Being part of a group carries risk, and if you are part of a group, you've got to be thinking ahead and making your own decisions, because that's vitally important. So let's go back to the question I started with. Opinion changed at all on who was guilty to begin with? And I can close down this slide now, and so I'll be able to see your faces again. So that's the end of my presentation. So the question is, if people are on mute, and going back to that first scenario, now who does everyone think is guilty out of those three boys? Lola, I'll answer your question first. Why are 14 to 17-year-olds vulnerable to this law? It's because that's a kind of age when it's typically boys. It's more boys than girls. And 14 to 17-year-olds is the key age when boys are out with their peers. Yeah. Before that, you tend to be more homebound, don't you? Yeah. And that's why it affects more 14 to 17. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the age they want to mingle with others. They want to go and play at the playground. They want to leave the house. They don't want mom and dad to control them, isn't it? They want to have that freedom.
Yes.
And the people they are going to meet, they don't know them very well.
You can be the best parent in the world, but typically from about 13 onwards, boys in particular are more, they take more account of what their friends say than what their parents say. Yeah, or at least their peers have a greater say in what they do. And so that's why peers are really important.
People like 13 years of age.
Sorry, Esther, was you saying something? Is that someone else?
I guess is that Sister Bola Tito? Do you want to ask a question? If you've got a question, please you can raise your hands up so that we know who want to ask question. Is that okay? Yeah. But I think it's Sister Bola Tito. Yeah. Any question? Okay, just continue. I know they have a lot of questions, but just let's.
And so, just some things to consider. So, in that first scenario, all three of those boys would be charged with murder. Yeah. All three of them would be charged with murder. And that's a really scary situation. Because that's not a massive, that's not a very uncommon thing that happens a lot. And what can start off as a very little fight can end up, I mean, that was just words to begin with, and then the knife appears and it all changes. And so whilst the other two, you can reasonably think there was no planning involved, what would probably get those three is several things. There's one about, if you know that your friend regularly carries a knife, then if something bad happens, if you get into a situation, then you can foreseeably, they will say that you could foreseeably see that the knife would be used. And if a knife is used, then murder's always on the table.
Absolutely. The other question I've got is, what is jail term for manslaughter?
What is?
Jail term for manslaughter. How many years if you are found guilty of manslaughter as a teenager?
So manslaughter starts at 5 years, murder at 14.
Murder at 14 years of age?
No, sorry, 14 years.
14 years.
Yeah. So you can get 5 years. Manslaughter starts at 5 years for manslaughter. Murder starts at 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of what age you can get done with murder, in England, the age of criminal responsibility is 10 years old. So from 10 years.
Okay. So that means if anybody commits a crime at the age of 10, or you are involved, you are just going around with some friends, even when you don't know that they've got knives on them, can that still have an implication on you when you are not even aware?
And that's one that that would always be put to juries, and the defense would use that just to see, well, did they know that that person carried a knife? So what would count here? Does that person have any previous charges for carrying a knife? If that's the case, then they would say that you reasonably knew that that person carried a knife, and therefore you could foreseeably see that a serious offence could happen. Yeah. So that would be the argument. Yeah. On top of that, it would also be about what happens afterwards, how they acted afterwards. So if you all run away, no one informs the police or anything, then that would tend to suggest that you had an understanding of what was going on. So you haven't been forthcoming straight away. So that would also go against you as well. Typically, when you think about our children, this thing about being a grass or snitching, yep. So very often children can find themselves in that situation and they don't snitch, and then they get that murder charge, or can be seen as a bare minimum as an accessory. But because they was there, so an accessory would be, I've come home and told my mum I've committed murder, and my mum takes my clothes and cleans them or burns them. She's an accessory after the fact. Because he was there, that would make it a lot harder for him to prove that he wasn't aware of what was going on, because he hasn't been forthcoming at the earliest opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Please, if you've got question, this is question and answer time. If you've got question, because I know a lot of us from my community, they don't understand what is called law of enterprise, crime by association. That's what we are talking about. Just to summarize again, for those of you that are just coming in, what that means is that
there's a couple of questions I've noticed in the chat box. So yeah, there was a who's a child, and that's anyone under the age of 18. So once you hit 18, you're no longer a child. What is ABH? It's oh gosh. I'm just trying to think what the A is. It's off the top of my head. The BH is bodily harm. Oh my gosh. I'm having
that's fine.
Peter's got to me. Bear me 1 second. I'll get there, because that's an easy one.
That's fine. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you can't, don't worry.
Oh, sorry,
I'm the one asking the question in the chat. ABH please ask your question.
ABH is actual bodily harm. Yeah.
Okay.
So jail term for manslaughter I've answered. The person that who's out of the country, can I get back? They're in a country that doesn't, but I think we do have extradition, but it's a country where you can go into the countryside kind of stuff and probably go missing for a long time.
So are you saying to me now that if the person run to Africa, they can't go and get the person back?
Well, yeah, because any country that has an extradition with us, yes, we can get the person back, but you've got to find that person first. And so even though that offence was committed in 2004, there's no statute of limitation on that. So if they come back to England, or if they get found where they are, then they would still, they'll face that charge. Yeah.
Okay. So another thing I want to ask you is the issue of stop and search. Yeah. Stop and search. Why is it that most Black children, boys, tend to be the victim that are being stop and search?
Yeah. And so there's several reasons for this, some more controversial than others. Yeah. So in the UK, there's no two ways about it. There's a perception that, and a reality, it depends upon where you are, that Black boys are more susceptible to certain crimes, particularly knife crimes. And so you'll find that they're much more likely to be stopped and searched than their white equivalent. What the evidence has shown, though, is that actually the stop and search doesn't mean that they're finding loads of knives on black boys. What happens is they can then get done for other offences. So you're a black person walking down the street or something like that, and I don't know, you've got a stolen phone, so therefore then you get done for the stolen phone, or you're carrying drugs, so therefore you then get done for drugs. Yeah, and so some of that is about racial bias. Yeah, some of it is about in certain areas, so like in London, West Midlands, more black boys have died of disproportionately of knife crime offences than how we are represented in the community. So a lot of that, some of it is about racial disparity, and some of it is about this perception that they're more likely to be an offender. Yep.
Okay. Now, the other question I've got loads and loads of questions, but because they are, if you got question, anybody, please raise your hands, use your virtual hand to raise your hands, and they will give you opportunity. But I want you to explain rule of law in the light of this. You have said to us that the UK age of criminality is 10 years of age. So
yes.
If you're a boy or a girl and you commit any crime in the UK, they are not going to let you go back to your mom or your dad. That's what they are saying to you. You are liable.
Yes, that's right.
It?
And
now, explain rule of law.
Yeah. And so, but don't forget, this is a spectrum. So it starts with very low level offending. Yeah. And so typically the first offences committed by children are either fare dodging or theft from shop. Yeah. They've stolen a Yorkie bar or something like that. You know, and for stuff like that, so they'll be taken home, and more than likely for a first offence, they get what we call an out of court disposal. So we're not going to go to court, and they'll probably receive what we call a community resolution. And that will be it. They'll take it home. Hopefully, parents give the child a stern word. Yeah, they get a community resolution, which will say what the offence is. Yep, and that's it. Nothing else is done. Let's say they then commit a further minor offence like that. They'll still get probably another out of court disposal. So maybe another community resolution. But this time, rather than no work being done with them, they're saying, actually, this is kind of like you've done something. And the first time we kind of just gave you a stern, verbal warning. Now we need to do something. You'd probably have to work with my agency, so the Leeds Youth Justice Service. If you're in Leeds, there's 157 yachts across the country, so every area has a yacht. So a youth offending team. So we call ourselves Youth Justice Service because we don't like the term offending. And you'd have to do a piece of work with us for around 3 months. And then we would look at why you did the offending. We'd look at the strengths as well in your life and try and get you back on track. What we find now, telling somebody not to offend doesn't tend to work. What works is finding out positive stuff they're interested in and supporting them to do that. A lot of the kids I work with have a poor school attendance, so a lot can be about just getting them back into school. As you commit more offences, you tend to go up the offences ladder. And so you can go from doing a 3-month intervention with us where we work with you for 3 months. As you get into more serious orders, that can go up to about a year. As you get into more serious orders, that can go up to 2 years. And then as you get into more serious orders, you're looking at custody, which will be for the most serious offences. And then even when you come out of custody, you still have to work with us as well. And typically for around anywhere from 6 to 18 months.
Oh, thank you so much on that, Trevor there. Another question I want to ask, because I'm waiting on my audience to ask questions, but I've got questions that will be of benefit as well. I want to ask, I noticed that a lot of Black children, males, they tend to do Afro hair. They tend to have this hairstyle, Afro hairstyle, especially children in secondary schools, you know, and then they carry this kind of
the Afro pick, the metal Afro pick.
Afro pick comb. And let me explain the comb to my audience.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a comb where the back end is, you know, it has a plastic, but the tail end of it that they used to comb their hair is made of iron. Iron. Now, in that kind of instance, can that be regarded as a weapon in the UK?
Spare me 1 second, just so that
That's
people
fine.
can get an idea
Of what we are talking about. That would
yeah,
be
yeah.
beautiful for them to see. Yes, this is it.
Yeah. So that's a Afro pick, yeah. And so I do a session on knife awareness and stop and search if you're ever interested. But
Yes,
yes,
we will definitely.
if you
We'll bring you back.
yeah, if you use something, even if it's not intended as a weapon, if you use it as a weapon, then it is classed as a weapon. And I currently have 2 children working with my service who have attacked people with Afro pick combs. It's exactly the same as if you're attacking them with a knife in the eyes of the law.
Thank you so much. Now,
Yeah.
I want and that ties to the next question. You know, we have DBS check.
Yes.
And we, of course, for those of us that are adults here, we know what DBS is because most of our work, perhaps as a doctor, nurses, carers, we know what is disclosure barring service, which is called CBS before. Now, it's called DBS. Anyway, to check your criminality, whether you will be able to work, you can work with children or not, or vulnerable adults. Now, if as a teenager, let's assume as a teenager, when I was 12, 13, I committed a crime, will this eventually show up in my DBS? When I become, say, 25, I'm now a doctor, medical doctor, I'm now reasonable. How would that impact on me?
Yeah, right. So this is a tricky one because it's very detailed and it very much depends on the offence. So there's a lot of offences, low-level offences, that if you commit them as a child, as an adult, once you turn 18, they will automatically come off your DBS. Yeah, even an enhanced DBS. So if you've done shoplifting and you was 13 years old, literally as soon as you've it's actually, there's 2 things. There's spent and unspent offences. So if you've committed a shop theft as a 13-year-old and you get a community resolution, effectively that is spent straight away. If you work on any out of court resolution with us, pretty much it's spent as soon as you've completed the work you've done. However, depending then on the offence of how serious that offence is, there are some things that never come off a DBS. So weapon offences never come off a DBS. So if you've been done for like possession of a knife, yeah, that would always stay on your DBS. There are certain offences that then can have an impact, obviously, with your work, because what you have to do then is you have to explain to work what happened. And so now you're a 35-year-old explaining about what you did when you was 13 and 14. Yeah. And some people typically, because there's a significant gap, it probably won't impact you too much, other than the embarrassment of having to explain what you've done. However, you're now a doctor, and you've explained that, they're happy with that, you've got the job, yeah. You're taking your kids on holiday to Disney World in America. That comes up, and they can say to you is, we're not allowing you into the country. There are certain countries that certain offences mean that you'd never go into that country pretty much. And people think that this isn't a major thing. So I can say that I worked with a colleague who was 40 years old at the time, had committed it was a drugs offence on this occasion, yeah, when he was a teenager. So for all intents and purposes, he declared it when he joined us, and that was so long ago. Fine, turned his life around, different person. You know what I mean? No issues. Absolutely great worker, great person. Took his kids to Disneyland in America, got stopped in the airport, and he was barred from the country. Yeah. And if you think you're going to Australia or places like that as well, you're not going. Yeah. Stuff like drugs offences and weapon offences can bar you from ever going to certain countries. And so what you did as a child would now affect you for the rest of your life. Yeah. And so it just makes everything harder. So it's not to say that you can't have a really good life, but imagine being at 40 and having to explain to your kids why you can't go to Disneyland with them and about what you did when you was 13 and 14. Yeah. That's a very hard thing to do. Yeah. And it happens a lot.
And that would be quite embarrassing, really,
Yes.
as a dad. So
Yeah.
what we are saying is, whatever you are doing now, and that's why I hope that those of us that are here, you will communicate these things to those that are not here. And that's why I brought Trevor here to explain to us. Because I know our society, our community, we don't know that there is a law called law of association, joint enterprise. And we are raising children in the UK. And you need to be aware of these things. Now, another question I'm going to ask you is this. Yeah. Why do some young people feel like they need to carry a knife to be safe?
Right, yeah. The biggest reason why children say they carry a knife is for protection. Yeah. Now, there's loads of other reasons as well. For some people, it's about status, that they feel, it makes them feel big and hard. For some, it's about getting respect from other people. For some, pretty much, if you're part of a gang, almost knife carrying goes hand in hand. That's like a doctor not having a stethoscope. Yeah, they go hand in hand. The other one is feeling that, like I said, the biggest one is they think it keeps them safe. All the stats show that if you carry a knife, you're much more likely to end up in a knife fight. And the reason why that is, particularly with boys, is because of the way boys think and that group think. So I'm with my four mates. I'm 16 years old. I'm with my four mates, yeah, and we all think we're men, because when you're 16 and 17, you think you're a man. It takes you to about 20 odd for you to realise, oh, I've still got a lot of growing up to do. Yeah. Yeah. Around that age, we get into some kind of situation with somebody else. Yep. They pull out a knife. If none of us have knives, we all feel quite able to run away because there's an imbalance. They've got knives, we haven't. We all run away. That's fine. If one of you is carrying a knife, that changes that power dynamic. Now you're equal. And so if you run away, that's seen as cowardly. So you're much more likely then to stay there and pull your knife out and have a knife fight. And once you end up in that situation, you're at risk of either you dying or you killing somebody. Either situation isn't a good situation to be in, either for you or your family and for your group of friends around you. So that's why carrying a knife is not a protective, it doesn't protect you. It actually makes it more likely that you're going to end up in problems, irregardless of the law. Yeah, because actually, as a black person, I think you're up to about, I think it was 6 times more likely to be stopped by the police. Yeah, so you're 6 times more likely to get stopped with that knife than your white friend. And the consequences to you, there is bias. Yep. If there's any connection in your family to any gang or anything like that, or one of your mates is on the periphery of a gang, it then can get linked to being a gang and it just spirals from there. Yeah. And so in truth, there is no good reason for carrying knives on the street.
Okay. Now, the next question I would then ask you is this. You know, we have different type of knives. You have table knives, you have kitchen knives, and we have knives that are made with plastics. Are those ones bad? You know, is it not just okay? You know, there are some. Let me mention other type of knives. You know, the ones that we used to call, our clippers. You know, the ones that we used to cut nails. Just the
Yes.
nail clip. But if you open it, if you flip it around, it has something like a sharp object in it as well, that looks like a
And
knife,
so,
sort of. They
so
call it
that
filer.
you
What
won't
is the
get
implication of having those kind of a thing with you
right.
as a black boy or a girl in
Yeah.
the UK?
And so it's like nail clippers and the ones that have the kind of little kind of a file on them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you got stopped with that, you're not going to get done for it being a weapon.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what we talk about is anything beneath 3 inches.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Not 3 inches, 3 centimeters. Sorry. Is not viewed as a weapon. However, if it's used as a weapon, it's a weapon. Yeah. So if you pull out that nail clipper in a fight and you use that file to stab somebody, it's a weapon. Yeah. And so it will be deemed as a weapon. So the offence is whatever the offence is, assault, it'd be assault with a weapon. Yeah. Which just aggravates it. And it's the same as if you had pulled out a zombie knife, one of these big machete things that kids have. In the eyes of the law, they're viewed the same. If it's used as a weapon, it's a weapon. Yeah.
So, if let's assume a child goes out, whether because they just came into the country, they just migrated, and they are not aware of this law. But back home in Africa, we can actually come to a law enforcer and can kind of wiggle our way around it. We can beg you. We can say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, my son. We are not aware. We just came into country 2 years ago. We don't know about this law." What do you think the law's position in that kind of a situation?
Right. So that would be taken as mitigation without a doubt, but you would still be charged with a weapons offence because in England, ignorance of the law is no defence. The fact that you don't know doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Can you hear that? Everybody is
Yeah.
not just because you don't know about this law,
Yeah.
will not get your child out. And that's
No.
why we are talking about these things. And we're still going to bring you back, Trevor, on this. I've got some other question. We are not letting you go
No, that's
quickly
fine.
like that. We are not. Please, if you've got question, please raise your hand. I'll mute yourself and ask your question. It's because none of you is asking question. That's why I'm asking him question on your behalf.
One of the things I would say about this, there's no stupid questions when it comes to this. Yeah.
At all.
There's a lot of things that you think, oh, that's common sense. It's when it comes to the law, it's not. Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you, if I'm a 14 years old, 15 years old, and I'm coming from school with my friends, with a pack of 4 or 5 boys, and then somebody came and challenged me and dare me, what should I do as a teenager if I'm embarrassed in the public?
Yeah, and see, this is a hard one. I remember being a 16-year-old, probably from about the age of 14, and that thing about status and not wanting to look like a coward or anything like that. Weak. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. I always say the best thing is first of all is to have foresight. I really do. If you can stop, a lot of situations are like dominoes. It starts off very small and then the one bounces onto the other. If you can get to the problem earlier before it gets aggressive, it's much easier to walk away. Yeah. So that's my first thing. If you know something's going to happen and you're just going to see what happens, I would say in the first instance, don't do that. Yeah. That's the point where it's really easy to walk away. And now I think even more so than my time, now you have your mobile phone. Pretend that your mom's called or something like that. And, got to go home. Lie. I'd rather lie to my friends than try to lie my way out of a murder charge because something's kicked off later on. Yeah. The second thing, once you get to that situation where it's getting aggressive, it really is looking about how you can de-escalate it with words. Yeah, it really is. And actually, that shows a level of maturity, more so than having a fight. Yeah. And this is how my mum explained it to me. Because I did get into a few fights. And she was like, this can't carry on. Yeah. Because you're the one who's going to get into trouble. And I had friends who carried on fighting, and some of them, I grew up in Hackney in London. Some of them ended up in prison. Yeah. But I did take on board my mum's advice. And she said that actually, if it ends up with you both fighting, even if you win the fight, you've probably still lost in some way. You've probably ripped a shirt, taken a punch or got a bruise or something like that. You might have the other person's blood on you, so you've ruined your clothes or whatever. And then there's the legal implications. So even if you have that fight and you win, you've still lost. But if somebody wants to have a fight with you and you can talk them into not having the fight and you both walk away, you're the champion. You've won. Yeah. Because you've convinced somebody, you've used your persuasive power, you've used your intellect and intelligence to turn something that could have gone really bad into kind of like a positive. And if you have that skill, that's a life skill that you can use in every single aspect of your life. Being able to beat somebody up isn't a life skill you can use in every single aspect of your life as you become an adult. Unless you're going to be a boxer, and it can only then comes into use when you're in the ring. Yeah. You know, your MMA fighter, it's only in use in the ring. Because if you do it outside the ring, you're still going to jail. Yeah. And so my mom said, practice skills that you can use in your life. Fighting isn't a skill you can use in your future life. And so practice the skills that can stop that, not the skills that aid that. You know,
I
because
totally agree with Mrs. Woodhouse on that.
Yeah.
God bless her for giving you that good advice. And I want to say, you don't have to actually lie. Just walk away.
Yeah.
Walking away is better than you going to prison for 5 years or 14 years.
Yeah.
I always say this to my sons. If you need to call me when you're anywhere you're not comfortable and you know that something is going to happen soon, if you need to call me, call me. I'm not going to be asking you awkward questions. Say that to your children, teacher, adult parents that are on the call. Say that to your child, to your son, to your daughter. If they need to call you so that you can get them out of whatever situation they find themselves, let them know that they can do that. Rather than having the fear of, oh, if I call my mom, will my dad, or what would they say? No. Let them know that they can rely on you to come and take them away from that dangerous situation immediately. Thank you so much on that.
Yes.
But we've got some questions on the chat already. Do you want to go there, or do you want me to read it to you?
No, I'll go in there. Yeah.
All
Just on that subject as well, I've talked about what kids can do. As parents, that is what you can do. Is say to your kids that if you're ever in trouble, at that point, I'm not going to be asking you questions. I'm not going to be any punitive. I'm just going to be a support. I will come and get you or whatever. You can do the punishment and the punitive stuff after. First thing is keeping your child safe. Now, I think that's a really good way of doing that, is saying to them, you can always call me. I will always come. The investigation will be after, kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay, look at these. Yeah. So a girl was stabbed in London on her way from school. Such a child could have some fears about walking from school, etc., and feel the need to carry a weapon. Being aware of this history, would such individuals still be thought to be committing an offence by carrying such? Absolutely. Yeah. If you're scared about walking home, then there's something else you can do. It's about how you can keep yourself safe. You can speak. And this is that kind of thing. It's really hard because I get it. But having the knife on you doesn't keep you safe. Because then what you're saying is, if you encounter a situation where someone pulls a knife out on you, you're pulling a knife out as well. So there's no safety there. It's not like a knife is not like a shield. Yep. It doesn't protect you from anything, you know. And so in that instance, your mum would say, well, if you're scared of being stabbed, then the defensive option is a stab-proof vest kind of thing. But, I'm not saying go out and buy stab-proof vest, but it's about having that conversation. And it might be then, if you're really feeling unsafe, what is the school doing then? Because the likelihood is it's probably kids from another school or in the same school. Yeah. So what are the school doing? Have you informed the police? Because the police can take action as well. And I'm not saying this is a perfect world and that things would always be done, but carrying a knife is never the right option. Yep. And it won't be seen as mitigation. Yeah. She will still be charged. Pepper spray is an offence to carry in England, just full stop. Yeah. And that's a weapon. Yeah. So yeah, you can't carry pepper spray in England. That would be just seen as a weapon. Yeah. How do the laws around ceremonial or religious knives differ from ordinary knife possession? And how can young people avoid misunderstandings or wrongful association in these situations? Right. So I'm not totally 100% with this, but as I understand it in England, the only two instances I can think of where you can carry a ceremonial weapon is if you're Sikh, yeah, and they have a ceremonial dagger. You've probably seen that with a recent thing that happened, yeah. Although he wasn't a Sikh ceremonial weapon he used in the assault, yeah. And the other one is Scottish men when they're wearing the kilts. There's a little dagger, I believe, they put in their boot, I think, and that's the only other time. Other than that, it's seen as a weapon. Yeah, and they are particularly to take into account people's religious and traditional values. And there's a discussion about whether that should still be allowed. Yeah. So we're just talking about just banning it totally. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the next question I've got is about bullying. How does bullying in school, not snitching, not reporting, and this, how does that impact on knife crime and then all of this?
I think the biggest thing is that people then don't say they're being bullied, and so instead they carry a knife because they want to feel safe. That's the biggest impact it has. Now, I've dealt with a lot of schools, and I'm not going to sit here and say that bullying policies in school are perfect. They are not. Yeah. But I do think we have to go through those steps of reporting it, continual reporting it. And I've said this, and I always say this to parents whenever they're doing anything with schools. I always say, don't say it, or if you say it, follow it up in writing. Yeah, because it's by an email. Yeah, because then you have a record of what you've said and hopefully what they've said in response, because they should respond to you in email then. So there's plenty of times when you think a school has said something to you, and then you go back and say, well, you said A, B, and C, and the school says, nope, we didn't say that. Yeah. Always, if you have a meeting with a school, send them an email in afterwards saying, oh, this is what was said, this is what was agreed. Yeah. And if you've got any issues with the school, speak to them about it and then just say, following my discussion with you today, these are the things that I wanted to cover. And that recording, it really does mean that you get a better service from the school. Yeah, because they know then that you're on it and that there's a record of what they've said. That counts legally. When it's kind of like, well, I think you said this, and they said, no, I didn't say that. Typically, the school's word is valued more than the parents' word. Shouldn't be, but that's just the reality of the situation. So I say, in where there's bullying, it's about getting your child to speak to you. It's less likely the child might go to a teacher, but if they've got a teacher who they feel comfortable with, have a good relationship with, I would say go to a teacher. I would always say go to a teacher and go to your parent. Yeah. And then things should be done. And if you're not seeing them get done, then that can be escalated because now you've got written proof of what hasn't been done. But definitely, never, the best option is never carrying a weapon or taking it into your own hands, because then you become the aggressor. And whether we like it or not, and things are getting better, but there's a stereotype of black people being aggressive. And then you feed into that stereotype, you become the problem, and the bully now is the victim. Yeah. And I've seen that happen where someone's being bullied by somebody for a significant period of time. It hasn't been handled yet. And that person has then ended up stabbing the bully, but they're the one who is currently, and the bully is going to school every day.
Right. Thank you
And the
so,
bully's
so
the
much.
victim, and the bully will get compensation for their injuries.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
And while
So in
they
all
were not the one that
senses, you
started it.
feel, you feel really bad because you just feel like it's been piled on you. So that going and thinking stabbing them works. It doesn't work. You become the offender. You're the one now who's going to have a much harder life because of that. There's better options. There's better options.
And that leads us to wrong decisions, that a decision that a teenager make can either destroy a teenager or makes a teenager, isn't it? So it's so
Yes.
important that the decisions our children are making is so important. Ability for them to learn to critically think, the skill of ability to critically think and say, okay, in this situation, this is what I'm going to do. If I'm in this kind of situation, I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to try and defend myself. And then you open yourself up to all sorts of things. Please, if you still got questions, please bring in your questions.
One other question, but I just want to, I'll answer that question, but there's just one other thing on that, is that this thing about feeling embarrassed in front of your friends, when you're sat in custody, your friends may come for the first couple of months, but when you're on some long sentence, your friends go on and they have their lives. Yeah. And I know this from personal. Like I said, I've had friends who ended up going to prison. They're not a part of my life now. Yeah. And so if they were doing something to prove status to me, they're not been a part of my life now. They're still suffering those consequences. This thing about status and my peers, just look at your parents. How many of your parents are still friends with people they went to primary school with or high school with? You'd have a few, maybe, but not many. Yeah. And so, but the consequences of you trying to look big and get the status in front of your friends are lasting forever, but those friends aren't. Yeah. And so yes, there's a couple of questions I'll answer now. Let's have a look.
Yeah.
Answer that one. Where does it stand with recording people if one feels threatened? On the topic of telling a child to walk away, can they record on their phones before parents arrive, etc.? Absolutely. Yeah. The only thing I would say about that is just be mindful that it might escalate the situation. Yeah. That you get your phone and that if it they might then want to grab it off you and fight you even quicker. So you have to weigh it up, kind of, you know. But yeah, it's not a crime or anything like that, and it can be. It's typical. A lot of the stuff with the kids, it's not by people they don't know. So the recording, in some sense, almost it can just heighten the situation because that person sees you recording them and then they grab the phone and then you get into a struggle and all that kind of happens. But yes, it's not a crime at all or anything like that. You can do that.
The next question I've got then is this: how does carrying a knife change how police, teachers, and others in the community see a teenager or twinning, despite the fact that I'm not using the knife, but I just have it on me?
So that's called possession. And yes, so your first possession, you get a community order more than likely, and you'd work with my organisation, Leeds Youth Justice Service. On the second, if you get a second offence of possession, yeah, then you open yourself to a 4-month custodial sentence. Yeah. So that's
What does
4
that
months
mean?
in custody.
Sorry.
4 months. So a second offence, then there's a law that you can then you do 4 months in custody. Now, I have to say that within Leeds, and pretty much most of the majority of the UK, to be fair, England and Wales, that second offence, unless there's aggravating factors around it, we try not to put kids in custody. Yeah. But you do an extensive piece of work with us. Yeah. And so that's just for possession. That's not you've got it out and you're waving it about. That's you've got it in your bag. Yeah. Or something like that. Yeah. Just possession alone is an offence. Yeah. And that also can carry a custodial term. So where you end up in prison.
And then would that show in my DBS as a teenager?
Yes, it will. Yeah.
Okay.
Your weapons offences never come off. So
Criminal
even though they
bureau
can
in
be
my
spent, they always stay on your for an enhanced DBS. They always stay on there. Yeah.
right.
And there's
Okay.
certain jobs you just won't be able to get.
Wow. 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 Who can I actually talk to if I'm being pressurized to carry a knife, or being in a group where knives are all around? Who can I speak to? You are working in Leeds, I'm in Leeds. Who can I talk to as a teenager or a tweener? Yeah.
Right. So you're a teenager, you're at school. The first and foremost, I say go to your parents. Yep. And let them know. Secondly, in your school, most schools have a police officer who's attached to the school. Yep, a safety schools officer. You can speak to them. Yep. Or I will speak to the safeguarding team. There's normally like you have a form tutor or something like that. You need to speak to an adult, and they can advise you of the sort of like support services that are out there throughout the country and throughout Leeds, I suppose. Yeah. That's my advice, is always speak to an adult. This is not a circumstance where you can deal with it. There is a reason why the courts see you as a child and then you have adults. And because there is a difference, I know I keep using the term child, and I know that if you're 16, 17, you don't want to be called a child, you want to be called a young person. But I always use the term child because when I'm in court, we make sure that we use the term child because we don't want the court to see them as an adult, because then they get more stringent sentencing. Yeah. And that's even the same with community orders. And so that's why we speak about child. And so I would say you've got this 6 foot, 16-year-old built like a brick house kind of, I always say, come to court in your school uniform. We want them to see the child in you, not the adult. Yeah. Because it makes a difference. Perceptions make a difference. Yeah.
Then could that be the reason why most time when you see people go to court, they tend to wear suits?
Yes. And what we find with a lot of our kids, they go there with the joggers on and stuff like that. It's almost like, when you see those pictures of what a burglar looks like, and they're wearing the black and white stripes and they've got the bag over them, pretty much wearing joggers to court, you're saying you're an offender. I said that's the last thing you want to wear. If you haven't got a school uniform to wear, some slacks, what you'd wear to go to church. Yeah. Kind of thing. Look presentable, it does make a difference. And the kids who don't do that, I always see that as a failure on the parents, to be totally honest with you. We're forever telling parents that your child needs to come to court looking a certain way. If they're in those joggers, you see them joggers and stuff like that, and everyone just thinks either drug dealer or they've got a machete down there or something like that. It's the perception, and it doesn't matter what the reality is. We all work off those perceptions, because I'll be straight with you. If I saw 2 kids in a school uniform walking towards me, I ain't got any issues. I see 2 kids and they're like wearing the joggers and they're all balaclavaed up, I'm on guard.
Absolutely.
And I don't care whether they're black or white, I'm on guard. Yeah. And so these perceptions count because they're much more likely to rob me than two kids in their school uniform.
Now, and that brings me to the question of how you dress. The way you dress is the way you'll be addressed. You know, carrying shoulder bags, you know, sagging your trouser, wearing jogging pants all around town, you know, wearing Prada and all of those things.
Yeah.
You know, what are the implications of this to people like you who are the law enforcers?
There's no two ways about it. I always say to kids that if you want to reduce your chances of getting stopped and searched by the police, don't dress how I just described. Yeah, don't have gloves on in summer. You know, well, there's kids out there today with balaclavas over their face. Why have you got a balaclava over your face? That's for the cold. Do you know what I mean? Where it's really cold, like -2 or something like that. You're hiding something, and if people think you're hiding something, then either they feel a bit scared, so they will avoid you, or if it's the police, they come towards you because they want to know what you're hiding. Yeah. I speak a lot about snagging, so I always say to particularly black boys, do you know what snagging stands for? Why it's called snagging? Well, I'll write it in the chat box. Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at that term snagging, yep, read it backwards, because it was a term invented not by black people, it was a term invented by white people for black people wearing baggy bottoms. So if you read it backwards, it's Nigga. So they call it not snagging, it's sagging. Sorry, I did it wrong. Yeah. There you go. Read sagging backwards. And it's telling you what they think of you. Yeah. You know, so I always say that we don't need to reinforce negative stereotypes of black people. And another thing my mom told me that whether you like it or not, as a black person, you're an ambassador for all black people. Absolutely. So everything you do reflects on all black people. And it may not be fair, but that's the reality of you living in England. Yeah. Is that what you do? And you see that in the media, that, you know, if a person of color does something, it reflects on it. So just with that Sikh attack, no Sikhs have ever done that in this country pretty much. And now they're talking about why should Sikhs be allowed to carry their ceremonial knives and we should take it off them. And, you know, there's a problem in the Sikh community, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's unfortunate. It's our cross to bear. It's the same with kind of like stop and search. I said it to my kids that see it as a game, be ultra polite to the police. If you tell a policeman, oh, you're doing this because you're racist, if they are racist, it doesn't make a difference. And if they're not racist, you just got their back up. You know, so just be as polite as possible, because what you're trying to do is walk away without getting searched and having to go to the police station. And what they're trying to do is search you and get you to the police station. The more polite you are, the better it is in that situation. And you can complain afterwards. Yeah. You know.
Thank you so much, Trevor. I've got a question in the chat there for you.
So I have a question. So in a scenario where your life is in danger, plus with the laws of the UK, what should you do when you don't have a weapon on you? So wow. Yeah. There's so many things. I always say the biggest and first and foremost thing is run. If you can run away, run away. Yeah. There's also something about, I suppose, you know, he's talking about the girl walking home who's scared because of being bullied and all that kind of stuff. Don't go down the side streets. Walk on the main roads. Do you know what I mean? Don't go down alleys. Don't wear headphones all the time. There's things you can do to make yourself less of a target. But if you get into that situation where you're in danger, having a knife to hand doesn't help in that situation. Yeah. What helps is if you've got fast feet and you can outrun them. Yeah. Or you can run into a safe location, like there's something nearby that you can run into. But yes, you can fight back, and there is, there is self-defense, but it's about how you fight back. If you go overly aggressive, then you can also still be seen as an offender. So someone attacks you and you kind of like punch them, they fall to the ground, and then you start kicking them and stuff, that is no longer self-defense. They fall to the ground and you run off, that will be seen as self-defense, because you're still trying to defend yourself, because you don't want them to get back up and do anything to you. Yeah. But there's no definitive answer I can give you to that, and there's no definitive answer I can give you to keeping yourself safe, because the reality of it is that there's things we can do to be safer, but we could never be 100% safe. Any other questions?
Oh, sorry, I was speaking muted. I was saying that with the last point I dropped there, possessing a knife carry a prison sentence of 4 years. Is that still what it is?
Yes.
So
Yes.
self-protection is not an excuse for carrying a weapon.
Never, ever,
You will
ever.
be arrested.
You will be arrested. Yeah, yeah. But in fact, there is no excuse for having a knife that you can use, if you, particularly if you produced it. If you're a chef and you're walking home with your chefing knives, different matter. Do you know what I mean? But even if that chef then produces that knife, that's an offence. Someone comes to attack them and they pull out the knife, that's an offence. Yeah. There's nothing in law where you pull a knife out and it's defensive. And like in America, you can shoot somebody. It's different here.
Even in America, there's a case that happened just last week of a boy who was sentenced to how many years now? Is it 35 years? Who was actually went to a playfield, a tent of these other twins. They were twins. So you must have heard the news. It happened in America just last week. This black boy went in there, he sat in their tent. So one of the twins came and said, please, can you just leave? And what this black boy did was, he's just 14. He brought out a knife. And of course, he's saying that it's the white boy that dragged him. And because of that, he brought out a knife in self-defense. But he stabbed the boy and the boy died. And that case was just within 2 weeks, it was over. Yeah. And was given, I think, 35 years, if I can remember at the top of my head. Yeah. These are real life situations. Yeah, this is a 40-year-old boy. Yeah. And who's going to spend his life for 35 years?
If that happened in England, he would have been charged with murder. Same. Yeah, he wouldn't have got 35 years because they have more stringent thing, but he would have been charged with murder, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
And that murder is 14 years here, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if you have 14 years now and you had 14 years to that, that's almost 28 years. Life is wasted already. By the time this young person comes out, life has moved on.
Yeah, yeah. So all them friends who you was doing it to look hard with or get the status and the respect, they've all moved on.
They've all moved on. They don't even remember what happened.
No, that's right. Yeah, yeah. And you're left with the consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. If there's no other question, I think we'll peg it here. I want to say a big thank you to Trevor. Definitely, we're going to bring you back. Please, those of us that on this call, the only thing you can do for me is to please spread the news. Let everybody know what you have learned on this call. I'm going to send the recorded version of it, the recorded version of this call to every one of you. Pass it to your family members, especially those of you that just came into UK and you know that they don't know what is called joint enterprise law, the law of association. They don't know that you cannot carry knife. Please help us to spread the news. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
Somebody, I was going to quickly answer Kemi. Yeah, Kemi, yeah. A taser or pepper spray, they're both weapons. They're both illegal in Britain. And that's, you know, some people have like the mobile phone that looks like a taser and stuff like that. Doesn't matter how it looks. If it's a taser, it's a taser, and it's a criminal offence. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that is it. Is there any other question before we close down in this session? It's over an hour and a half now. What can
Joe,
can
you can't carry anything as a weapon. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't carry anything, my dear. Don't carry anything.
Yeah.
Is that okay? What you need to do is to speak
a personal
to an
alarm.
adult.
Yes, you can have a personal alarm, like where you pull it out on the keyring and it emits a sound. You can have a personal alarm. Yes.
Now with personal alarm, when they start hearing it, will make your attacker to run away. Is that what you mean?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's spot on. That's a beautiful one. Please, I'm begging you, don't keep this to yourself. We have sent as much information to people to join, but for those of us that join, I want to congratulate you. At least you now know better. Please help us to spread the news and let everybody in our community knows about this law. Now, what we got coming up in our next Real Boy Smart Girls on the 31st, on the 30th of July is Chosen, Not Filtered. We'll be talking about self-esteem, identity, and body imaging, especially from the point of view of social media pressure. So please help us to spread the news. We'll continue to do what we are doing with the help of God on our side. Thank you so much, Trevor. I so appreciate what you did tonight. I know you're not letting a dime from me, but I want to believe my community is saying a big thank you for coming to us to speak to us. And thank you so much. God bless you.
You're more than welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
All right, bye. Bye.